Welcome to The Bitter Witness.
Don't be scared.
Hello. Welcome back. I'm Rebecca, and I'm your host for The Bitter Witness. I hope you've had a good couple of weeks. I've had a great couple of weeks. I've spent some time with my family, spent hours in my gardens, and I've almost finished reading an entire trilogy. It's been a long time since I've read something just for fun. Normally I've got my face in murder and true crime articles, but I've been able to close the laptop more in the past 2 weeks and pick up a great book. We are going through a horrible heat wave here in Ontario. It is so hot. It's so hot that we've taken to taking the dogs out for car rides at night so they can cool off by hanging out the windows. Miley loves to let the wind flap her huge hound ears, and she loves when the wind makes one side of her lip flap back and forth. It's hilarious. We've just been cruising around on gravel roads looking for cool things, and we've come upon some really interesting stuff that we didn't even know existed around our little town. Maybe next episode I'll tell you about some of them. As for the computer issues that I posted about on the Facebook page, well, they weren't really computer issues so much as they were me issues. Apparently, I closed my laptop without saving my document with all my research on it. Well, when I reopened my laptop, the script popped up and said that it was recovered. Do I want to save? And I, like a moron, clicked no, don't save, and all my research was gone. I went to the recycle bin to recover the document, and when I got there, I found it and clicked recover, and now I can't find where the damn document went on my laptop. So, needless to say, I had to rewrite all of my research for this episode. I will never click don't save ever again. Well, that's about it from my little corner of Ontario. Don't forget that for the summer months we are going to bi-weekly episodes, but don't panic. Once September arrives, weekly episodes will return. Let's get the business out of the way, shall we? If you like this episode or any episode, please head on over to the Patreon page and give the show some love. For less than a summer paperback novel, you can help me to continue bringing you episodes each week. You can also support the show on Spotify, and don't forget to give the show a 5-star review over on Apple. Apparently, it helps the show in the algorithm, which my sun-fried brain just cannot understand. Like, follow, and share the show on whatever platform you're listening to. Stop by our Facebook or YouTube page and leave a comment, or share a post with everyone you know, or don't know for that matter. Everyone is welcome here. That's enough of the business. Let's get to this week's case. The dogs are sleeping behind me, so puppy ASMR will be brought to you by both Miley and Piper this week. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and relax while I tell you about the Pogo murder. As always, I want to give top billing to our victims, Jesse, Brian, and to all their family and loved ones. I acknowledge you and send my love to you wherever you may be. The digital realm offers a tantalizing veil, often inviting individuals to shed their authentic selves and cloak themselves behind online personas. This compulsion often stems from a multifaceted desire. Some seek refuge from real-world insecurities, hoping to impress or acquire validation from strangers on the other side of the screen. They meticulously curate an idealized version of themselves, fabricating exaggerated accomplishments or even entirely new identities, all to garner admiration, acceptance, or even love, which they may feel is lacking in their offline lives. However, the delicate balance between harmless role play and profound delusion is perilously thin. The point of too much is reached when the fabricated life begins to eclipse genuine reality, when the individual can no longer distinguish between their true self and their online creation. This intricate dance of deception steps over a dangerous line when it escalates into devious or inappropriate sexual relationships, where manipulation, emotional entanglement, and even exploitation can culminate into intense jealousy. The pressure to maintain such a charade becomes immense, driven by the fear of exposure, a perverse sense of control, or even a twisted form of attachment to the false connection. These potent emotions, left unchecked, can tragically propel individuals down a terrifyingly dark, obsessive path, a descent where obsession takes root, leading to possessiveness, rage, and a profound sense of betrayal. Tragically, this spiral of resentment and control can culminate into violent crimes and, in extreme cases, murder. Specifically, when the fantasy shatters and reality, distorted by deception, exacts its horrifying toll. Our case this week takes us back to 2005. Back in the good old days before pandemics, iPhones, rickrolling, and when Pluto was still a planet. In my mind, Pluto, you are still and will always be a planet. Because if Pluto isn't a planet, then the mnemonic I use to remember the planet's order doesn't make sense. Man very early made jar stand up nearly perpendicular. Without Pluto, it's just man very early made jar stand up nearly. And that sounds dumb. Besides that, Pluto is cool. It was named for the Greek god of the underworld, also known as Hades. It has 5 moons. 1 year on Pluto is equal to 248 years on Earth, and it is cold there, with temperatures averaging about negative 232 degrees Celsius. So we're back in 2005. The internet is gaining popularity, and there is a certain website called Pogo. Now this website is a game website, not like what you would think of today. It was just a place to play card games, bookworm, wordwomp, things like that. I will tell you that I personally have been a member of Pogo since 1999, and I love it. I still play on it every day. Pogo was initially called Excite Games and hit the World Wide Web in 1989. And then, in 1999, it was rebranded as Pogo. The site has evolved over the years by adding new games, but it's a nice place to go and play a relaxing card game after a long day. Now, something that has remained the same over all this time is that there are specific chat areas where you can chat with friends that you meet online. You can also play private games and have private chats with your friends. I have several family and friends that play on the platform, and sometimes we will meet up for a game of gin or whatever. Back in 2005, though, in order to play a game on Pogo, you actually had to go into a specific chat room. 46-year-old Thomas Montgomery is a member of Pogo in New York State and enjoys playing blackjack and poker. Now, you couldn't play for real money on Pogo. You just played for Pogo tokens, which you could then use to purchase items for your avatar or a badge on the platform. Thomas also enjoyed the chat aspect of the site. Thomas was using the chat as a kind of escape. He was married to Cindy with 2 teenagers, and he and his wife were having marital issues. He worked as a machinist at the Dynabraid Corp in Clarence, New York. From the outside, he appeared to be a pretty average Joe. He was a recovering alcoholic. He was also a Sunday school teacher and sat on a swim board for one of his daughter's swim clubs. According to some articles that I found, many of his neighbors and acquaintances all said that Thomas was a good guy, a great neighbor, maybe a little awkward, but just an all-around average good guy. So the friends that he was making in the chat rooms on Pogo allowed him to have relationships with people with no responsibilities or issues. Then one night, Thomas receives a message from a person with the screen name Tall Hot Blonde. You see, everyone uses a screen name in Pogo. I mean, we all had screen names back in the day, and to this day, Pogo players still use screen names. Thomas's screen name was Marine Sniper. I mean, if I saw that screen name back then, or even now, the first thing I would think of is a skinny 14-year-old boy who was just on the verge of puberty. But apparently, Tall Hot Blonde was interested. When Thomas saw the screen name Tall Hot Blonde, he was at first a little apprehensive, but he thought, what the hell? So he messaged her back. The two started chatting with the normal pleasantries. Hi, how are ya? Blah, blah, blah. And then Tall Hot Blonde told Thomas that her name was Jessie and that she was 18 years old and a senior in high school in West Virginia. Now, instead of doing the right thing and literally ending the conversation because Thomas, Mr. Marine Sniper Shitpig, was 46 and married, and Jessie is 18, he decided to have some fun and chat up this teenager. Jessie pointed out to Thomas that he was in the wrong chat room, that this one was supposed to be for kids only. At this point in Pogo's evolution, like I said, you had to enter a chat room in order to play the games. But each game had several different chat rooms, and they all had different parameters for you to go in and play the games, like clean language only, kids only, adults only. I think there were even some Christian ones on there. But Thomas informed Jessie that no, he was in the correct chat room because he was also 18, and that his name was Tommy. He also told her that he was a Marine and about to be shipped off to fight in the Iraq War. So Shitpig Thomas and Jessie continued talking, and eventually they took their chats private. At this point, Thomas sends Jessie a picture of himself to prove exactly who he was. It was Thomas in a Marine uniform, but the picture was almost 30 years old. So we have this poor teenager Jessie who literally has no idea that she is talking with a 46-year-old man who is married with two teenagers who are most likely around the same age as her. And after a little bit, things started to pick up. The two started to flirt and send some racy pictures. These racy pictures were mainly sent from Jessie to Tommy. She sent him pictures of herself playing softball and basketball. The only pictures that Tommy ever sent to Jessie were of him in his Marine uniform and his Marine days. But then things ramped up even more. Jessie started sending some pics of her in suggestive poses and, well, things of that nature. I'm not going to go into specific details because, well, this whole thing is inappropriate. Thomas should have stopped this before the first pictures were sent. He should have stopped this the instant she said she was 18. But sadly, he didn't. He would describe boot camp for Jessie and tell her all these crazy things that he was doing as he was preparing to ship out. He then told her that he was being sent on secret missions for the military that he couldn't tell her about, and that because he was a sniper, he was being sent out to do all sorts of top secret things. He told Jesse that he was 6 feet tall and built like a brick shithouse. Total lies. When you look at this shit pig, all you see is a pudgy, middle-aged man with a porno mustache, balding, and wears glasses. Not that there's anything wrong with being balding or having a mustache or wearing glasses, but I'll tell you, the real Thomas is far from 6 feet tall and built like a brick shithouse. So, this online love affair between 46-year-old Thomas, who was pretending to be 18 years old, and 18-year-old Jesse went on. And as it went on, Thomas started introducing Jesse to other people in his life. Well, at least that is what Jesse thought. At one point, Thomas introduced Jesse to Tommy's father, which was really just Thomas. So now he's playing the part of 18-year-old Tommy and Tommy's father. Oh, the webs we weave. Thomas had to introduce another character into the deception because he had told Jesse that Tommy was at boot camp and that he wouldn't always be able to contact her. So when Tommy was incommunicado, Jesse would send messages for Tommy to his father and ask his father to forward them on to Tommy for her. Jesus, are you following this? But that doesn't make sense. If a military person is incommunicado, they are incommunicado with everyone, not everyone but their parents. And that just shows how naive Jesse actually was and the level of deception Thomas is using on her. Also, I kind of wanted to see how many times I could say incommunicado in one episode. Thomas stated that the real reason he introduced the character of Tommy's dad was because he was getting nervous about the entire relationship with Jesse, and he was hoping to end it by using Tommy's dad as the bad guy. And he sort of did, but not really. And this is fucked up, so strap in. When Thomas was online portraying Tommy's father, he would tell Jesse that she should stop talking with his son and that they should end the relationship because it would never last. But then this absolute shit pig would log in as Tommy, and according to Thomas, Jesse would start speaking seductively to him, and he couldn't help himself but to tell Jesse to just ignore his dad and that he loved her and they would soon be together. You smell that? That is a great big pile of steaming pig shit right there. You couldn't help yourself, Thomas. You couldn't help yourself. You couldn't help yourself, but you had to just keep catfishing this poor teenage girl into thinking that an 18-year-old Tommy loved her. And to blame her is just, well, that's greasy, Thomas. I mean, victim blame much? Oh, this poor girl, Jessie, she has absolutely no idea that she's being groomed by this 46-year-old asshat. You could have stopped this. It's actually very simple. You change your screen name and you don't speak to her ever again. And you know what blows my mind about this is he actually had teenage daughters. And not once did it ever occur to him how he would feel if a greasy 46-year-old man was grooming one of his daughters online. This man is a piece of shit. So as time goes by, Thomas and Jesse's relationship moves to the next level. They start sending gifts back and forth, like real life gifts through the mail, not online. They started actually speaking on the phone and having phone sex. They were also having chat sex inside the chat rooms that they were communicating in. According to Thomas, when the relationship became sexual, he began to feel extremely dirty about everything. But he stated that he was in such a deep web of lies with Jesse that he just couldn't stop. He had to keep the relationship going. Again, yes, you can. log out. Just log out, you dirty old pig. It's literally that simple. You log out and start to work on your marriage and spend time being a father to your kids. Done. I just solved all your problems. Thomas stated that he was so invested in the web of lies and the relationship with Jessie that it seemed real to him. He said that this fake reality with Jessie had become more real to him than his actual real life. Later, at the trial, a letter that was found in Thomas's house was presented as evidence, and this letter shows just how far shit pig Thomas was taking this relationship with Jessie. The letter was dated January 2nd, 2006, and it read, "On January 2nd, 2006, Thomas Montgomery, 46 years old, ceases to exist and is replaced by an 18-year-old battle-scarred Marine. He has money in the bank, $2.5 million. He's handsome, like a red-headed Harrison Ford. He is moving to West Virginia to be with the love of his life." In the middle of that letter, Thomas went into great detail regarding his penis and what all he would be able to do with his penis. But I'm not going to read that part to you because, ew. If you're really wanting to know what all he said about his schlong, you're more than welcome to search it out on the web. One of the reasons that Thomas included all these graphic details was because, according to both Thomas and his wife Cindy, he was not able to, let's just say, make the purple helmeted stormtrooper salute when in felicto with his wife, if you know what I mean. All jokes aside, though, this is absolutely terrifying that a grown man could become so obsessed with grooming a teenager that his mind is actually telling him it's real. And all the while, Jessie has no idea and is falling for a fictional Tommy. And this right here, this story is why everyone tells you to pay close attention to what your kids are doing on the internet. Reading that letter and knowing that there is no way that Thomas would be able to turn the age clock back or make himself handsome, which, again, he was not in any way, I have two thoughts. The first is that he was thinking about or planning to move to West Virginia and kidnap Jessie and keep her somewhere. Because the instant that Jessie saw a 46-year-old pudgy, balding man in front of her saying he was Tommy, she would have screamed and ran away. The second is that he was planning on moving to West Virginia to try and infiltrate Jessie's world in some way until he could get her alone. Either way, Jessie is in more danger than she ever has been. And he seems to be setting up for an insanity defense in the future. At least, that's what it seems like to me. Luckily and thankfully, Thomas was discovered before he could do anything to Jessie. Unluckily, he was discovered by one of his own daughters. Ugh. One day, his daughter had to borrow his computer to do something, and while she was using it, an instant message popped up on the screen from Tall Hot Blonde. Can you imagine using your dad's computer and getting a message from his online lover? Ugh, ick. Immediately, the daughter went to her mom, Cindy, and showed her the message that popped up. I don't know what that pop-up said, but I can just imagine what it said based on where Thomas and Jessie were in their relationship. That poor girl must have been so traumatized in a myriad of different ways. I can't even imagine how she felt when she went to her mother with this. On the flip side of that, this actually tells me that Cindy must have had a very strong relationship with herself and her two teenage daughters, that the daughter felt secure enough to bring it to her and show her. Many kids might have just not said anything at all because of embarrassment or misdirected shame or just thinking that they might get in trouble for seeing it. Cindy, who I have now nominated for Mother of the Year, started digging into all of Thomas's online activity like any normal wife would do. I would have done the same thing. I would have been a bloodhound, man. Once you get a scent, you don't stop until you find everything. Cindy doesn't just stop at the computer and all the activity there. She starts searching through the house and she finds mountains of shit. She finds love letters between Tommy and Jesse, both on the computer, but also the physical letters that had been sent through the mail. She finds lingerie hidden in Thomas's dresser, specifically a pair of red undies that had been sent through the mail. She finds a gold chain that was engraved with Tommy and Jesse forever. And she also found all the X-rated photos that Jesse had sent to Thomas. And it was at this point that she realized that the woman she thought Thomas was cheating with was an actual teenager. At first, she thought that Thomas was cheating with an adult, and that would have been bad enough. But it was worse. He was not only cheating on her with an 18-year-old, but he was grooming that 18-year-old by pretending to be an 18-year-old. Can you imagine how devastated and angry Cindy had to be at this point? This is the man she married, that she had kids with, that she'd been married to for over 20 years. But at this point, Cindy's mom vibes came flying out of her. She wrote a letter to Jessie telling her who Tommy really was. And she put a copy of the family picture with the real Thomas inside the envelope and mailed it off to Jessie in West Virginia. In the letter, Cindy wrote, quote, "Jessie, enclosed you will find a picture of my family. Let me introduce you to these people. The man in the center is Tom, my husband. There is no Tommy. He is taking advantage of you. You need to be much more cautious with your safety. You will only be hurt by a man who has mastered the art of manipulation and lies. Do not trust words on a computer. Cindy." Unquote. Oh my God, what a badass mom. I love Cindy. Cindy was mature enough to realize in a moment of rage and betrayal what the entire situation was and that this teenager was in danger. A few days later, Jessie gets this letter in the mail and is livid. Can you imagine? Just for a second, just imagine that you've been having a relationship with who you believe is a young, handsome Marine. And then one day, months into the relationship, you get that photo in the mail and a letter telling you that your handsome Marine is actually the middle-aged shit pig in the pic. I'll post the family photo so you can see it, but Cindy and Thomas's daughter's faces are blurred out because they're victims in this too, and they don't need to be publicized, and I won't be the one to do it. But seriously, can you imagine? I'd probably vomit just thinking about all the personal and intimate things I had done with who I thought was Tommy. I would puke. I would be so devastated. I literally can almost feel Jessie's heart breaking reading that letter. The level of betrayal is just off the charts. At some point throughout the relationship, and I looked, but I could not find out how this happened, but apparently Thomas had introduced Jessie to a guy that he worked with at Dynabraid named Brian Barrett. Best guess would be that Brian was a member of Pogo and played the games with Thomas at some point. I don't know, but from the way the documentary portrayed it, Brian must have thought that Jessie was an adult woman having an affair with Thomas. Apparently, he had no idea that Jessie was 18. You see, Brian was 22 years old. And according to an article that I found online, Thomas and Brian were kind of friends on and offline. Apparently, Brian had been to Thomas's house for dinner at some point, but I couldn't find out exactly how close Thomas and Brian were. Can we just stop and point something out here? The fact that a 46-year-old man is surrounding himself with 18 and 22-year-olds, what the hell? Why is he introducing Jesse to Brian? And why is he befriending Brian in the first place? I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to say it. So you can't make any friends your own age, Thomas? Do you think there might be a reason for that? I don't know, like you're a shit pig and everyone knows it? I'm just saying. After Jessie got over the shock of Cindy's letter, she immediately messaged Thomas. Jessie told him that she knew the truth about him and all his lies. She told him he should be arrested and sent to jail for what he had done to her. She signed off by saying, "I hate you and I never want to speak to you again." But then Jessie started thinking about everything, and she wanted to make sure that what this letter from Cindy had told her was the truth. So Jessie messaged Brian Barrett and asked him if what Cindy had told her in the letter was true. Brian told Jessie that yes, Thomas was a middle-aged, balding man with a family, and he was a little confused about Jessie's questions. At least until, that is, Jessie informed Brian that she was an 18-year-old high school senior and that Thomas had been pretending to be an 18-year-old Marine and that Jessie and Thomas had been having a hot and heavy online love affair. Brian, being the decent man that he was, felt really, really bad for Jessie and tried to make her feel better. And the two sort of became friends. Jessie and Brian actually became good friends. Brian would let Jessie vent about her feelings about the betrayal by Thomas, and eventually the two realized that they were way closer in age than the real Thomas and Jessie, and that Brian and Jessie had way more things in common. And so they started dating online. Brian Barrett was the oldest in his family. He was working part-time at the Dynabraid Corporation as a machinist, and he was also going to school to become a teacher. He coached Little League, soccer, and he had just bought himself a new truck that he was really proud of. Everyone who met or knew Brian absolutely loved him, and everyone had the same thing to say about him. He was an amazing young man. Now Jessie is dating Brian online. You know, this might just be the mom in me kicking in, but Jessie, honey, maybe you should give online dating just a break for a little while. A few days, maybe a few months. Anyway, Brian and Jessie started getting hot and heavy, just like Jessie had with Tommy, or Thomas. But during the whole time that Jessie was dating Brian online, she was still messaging Thomas, telling him that she had moved on and that she had a new boyfriend and that her new boyfriend was way better than Thomas could ever hope to be. Things like that. Jessie, this is not a good idea. You're playing with fire. While Jessie was taunting Thomas in messages, Brian was at work and telling anyone who would listen what Thomas had done with an 18-year-old over the internet. As well, he was telling everyone at work that now, in fact, he himself was dating the 18-year-old that Thomas had betrayed. This whole thing is just messy, messy, messy. Naturally, Thomas was getting pissed. He was being outed at work and people were judging him and whispering about him, and, well, it was just a huge shitstorm for Thomas. Not that he didn't have it coming to him. It was a shitstorm that he had created, but it was still a shitstorm nonetheless. Even when Thomas was at home, he couldn't get away from the shitstorm. Because not only did Cindy and his daughters know all about the relationship with Jesse, but every time he went onto Pogo, he would see Brian and Jesse in the chat rooms, and Brian and Jesse had no qualms telling everyone inside the chat rooms exactly how greasy Thomas was and exactly what he had done to Jesse. And then, because Jesse had reported Thomas to the admins of Pogo and what he had done to her, his account on Pogo was suspended, which only brought the level of anger boiling inside Thomas up to about, 8 trillion and 1. So to say that Thomas was a ticking time bomb would be the understatement of the year. Thomas then reached out to Jessie on another platform and asked her why she was doing this to him, and he apologized for deceiving her and begged her to just leave him alone, and he promised he would never contact her again. Jessie accepted Thomas's apology, and then she did something that, well, I would call it greasy and basically not cool. After Thomas had apologized and promised to never contact her again, Jessie started messaging Thomas on this other platform, telling him how much she missed him and that she wanted the two of them to get back together and that she was okay that he was 46 years old. She told him she missed their virtual online sex life and wanted to start it up again. But at the same time she was telling Thomas this, she was also on Pogo telling everyone and anyone that would listen that Thomas was a predator and that people should stay away from him. Like, what? Jessie, what the fuck are you doing? I know you're 18 and in the States that means you're an adult, but baby girl, you have a lot of growing up to do. Honestly, this was a dangerous game she was playing, and don't forget, while she's doing all this, she is still having a very active online love affair with Brian. We have titles for little girls like you, Jessie, and Shit Snake S is one of them. So Jessie and Thomas continued on with their online romance, and everything went back to the way it was prior to Thomas being caught. The intensity was crazy between these two. Some of the messages back and forth are, well, they made me throw up a little bit in my mouth, and I'm not going to read any here because, ew. You can find them online if you are greasy like that. But then, after a while, Jessie says to Thomas in a message that she's made a mistake, and she wished that she had never started their relationship back up. Remember, she's still online dating Brian while she's getting all online hot and heavy with old man Thomas. When Jessie broke it off with Shitpig Thomas this time, he went into a full-fledged rage. I'm talking a bull inside a ring with a red flag being waved in his face kind of rage. Unfortunately, Thomas was misdirecting his anger just a bit. Instead of being angry with Jessie for playing him like an 8-string banjo, all of his fury was pointed at the one person he saw as the reason for him losing his online love, Brian Barrett. While Thomas and Brian are at work, Thomas is listening in on Brian's conversations with others, and Brian is telling everyone that he and Jessie were making plans to actually meet up in real life, and that he was so excited to meet her. In Thomas's mind, the only reason that Brian wanted to meet Jessie in real life was to have real life sex with her and take her virginity. Because according to Jessie, she had told Thomas she was still a virgin, and she had told Thomas numerous times throughout their relationship that she wanted Thomas to be the one to take her virginity. And for some weird and most likely greasy reason, Thomas was furious that Brian had his sights on taking Jessie's virginity. In Thomas's mind, it should be him and only him that got to take her virginity. Oh my God, the testosterone level is getting so deep in here. I'm going to need to find an ovary to float out on. Why is a woman's virginity such a conquest? Like, seriously, grow the fuck up, Thomas. Around September of 2006, Thomas had figured out the plot by Brian to get Jesse's virginity. So now that Thomas has figured out what Brian's intent is with Jesse, he starts logging onto the computer and badgering and insulting and threatening Jesse. And he is calling her a whore and all sorts of horrible shit, like terrifying things. For instance, at one point he told her that the only time, and this is disgusting and horrific, so trigger warning, that he wanted to see her again was if she was being gang raped. And that would be when I would turn off the computer and would never go back onto any of those sites again. But not Jessie. She kept going back for more. She and Thomas would have really weird exchanges. For example, this one. Thomas writes, "I hate him with a passion, and for 10 cents, I would eliminate him." Jessie responds with, "That's a little drastic, isn't it?" Thomas replies with, "Payback is a motherfucker, Jessie. I am the ultimate weapon. I am a Marine." Jessie responds with, "What are you going to do?" And it just goes on and on and on. Basically, by the end of the conversation, Thomas has informed Jessie that Brian will die violently. It always amazes me how brave and stupid people get behind a keyboard. "I'm the ultimate weapon." No, Thomas, what you are is the ultimate shit pig. Just from that one example, you can see the peacocking that Thomas is doing, and it almost seems like Jessie is enticing him along, encouraging a little bit maybe. It's weird. It's terrifying, and it's weird. Jessie should have taken those messages to the police, but instead, she told Brian that he had to be very careful at work, and she told Brian to make sure that Thomas stayed away from his truck. I think she thought that Thomas would do something to the truck, like cut the brake lines or something, and that would cause Brian to get into an accident. Brian told Jessie that recently Thomas had tried to hit him with his car while Brian was walking into work through the parking lot. Brian asked Jessie if she thought he should tell a boss at work or something, because at this point Brian was getting scared. You definitely should tell someone if someone tries to hit you with their car. I would go with the police, not a boss at work, but you should definitely tell someone. On Friday, September 15th, 2005, around 10 p.m., Brian was leaving work. He wasn't in that great of a mood because this was supposed to be the weekend that he and Jessie were going to meet. But Jessie had canceled the plans at the last minute because she said she wasn't ready to meet up in real life. So Brian was walking to his truck. After climbing inside the truck, he was shot in the neck 3 times. People in Brian's close circle thought that Brian had gone out to West Virginia to meet up with Jessie. No one knew that Jessie had canceled. So because of that, no one knew that Brian hadn't gone to West Virginia. And his body wasn't discovered until the Monday morning when people started arriving for work. Police were called, and when they arrived, they found shell casings, a peach pit, and the back tire on his truck had been slashed. This sucks so hard because Brian really never did anything in all of this. This giant web of lies and deceit and betrayal and just all of this garbage. Brian was the one who told the truth about everything. He was just being a nice guy. And apparently he fell for the wrong girl. Not that I'm victim blaming in any way, shape, or form. This is not Brian's fault. But whoever had murdered Brian had made sure that that truck wasn't going to move anywhere. And shooting Brian would have been just like shooting fish in a barrel. Brian probably didn't even notice the flat tire when he climbed into the truck that night. So police started asking around at Dynabraid to see if anyone had a beef with Brian at work, and everyone said, yeah, Thomas Montgomery hated Brian. Like, hated. Many of the coworkers tried to explain the situation to the police about the weird and creepy love triangle of Jesse, Thomas, and Brian, but no one really knew all of the specifics. They knew enough to give the police a direction. So police try and find Thomas at work, but guess who never showed up that Monday morning? Correctamundo. Shitpig Thomas was nowhere to be found. So because police were unable to locate Thomas, they started to get worried about Jessie. So they tried to locate her by finding her Pogo profile, but they were having trouble figuring out where in the United States she was. So it's kind of funny. They went to a young front desk sergeant and asked that sergeant for help traversing the internet, and probably within 20 minutes, this young sergeant had Jessie's last name and her address in West Virginia for them. He found it through MySpace. Listen, man, always ask the young ones to help you with computer stuff. They will always know it better than us. Always. I honestly was never into MySpace. I was a big MSN chat girl, which interestingly enough was shut down about a month after Brian's murder in 2006 because the platform was found to allow pedophiles and predators too easy of access to vulnerable people and youth. And that was the truth. There were some sick fucks on that platform. You really had to be careful. But other than MSN chat, I just stuck with Pogo and happily played my games. Once they were able to get Jesse's address, police made their way to West Virginia. And when they arrived and knocked on the door, a woman in her late 40s answered. The woman told the police that her name was Mary Sheeler and that Jessie was her 18-year-old daughter. Police explained the entire love triangle turned murder story to Mary and then told her that because Brian had been murdered and they were unable to locate Thomas, they were really worried about Jessie's safety. They asked Mary if there was any way for her to get in touch with Jessie to make sure she was okay. But Mary told them Jessie was out and there was really no way to reach her. Police were a little taken aback at the lack of reaction from Mary about the possibility that her daughter could be in serious danger. But the police kept on pressing Mary, trying to find out where Jessie was and what she was doing and how they could get in touch with her. When all of a sudden, Mary starts to cry. She looks at the officers and says, "I need to admit something." Police ask her exactly what it was that she had to confess. Mary informed them that her daughter Jessie wasn't actually the one who had spoken to either Thomas or Brian online. It had been Mary posing as her daughter online. You didn't see that one coming, did ya? Me either. Mary told the police that she was the one who had had online sex with both Thomas and Brian, and that she was the one who had sent all the gifts and letters through the mail. And then Mary admitted that the pictures that she had sent to both Brian and Thomas were of her daughter Jessie, but that she herself, Mary, had taken almost all of the pictures when Jessie was unaware that there was a picture being taken of her. We need to stop for a moment and point out what a horribly shitty hag of a mother this Mary Sheeler is. How could you do that to your daughter? Your own daughter. Look, if you want to live in a fantasy world online and pretend to be someone else and have virtual sex and phone sex and all the other crap that goes with it, go right the fuck ahead. But make up a person to do that. Don't use your real daughter. When I read this, I was speechless. This is disgusting. I can't believe that a mother would do that to a daughter. So it was Mary who was playing Thomas and Brian against each other. And the police would find all the pictures of Jesse inside Thomas's house. And some of those pictures were of Jesse swimming in the pool or in sort of a sexy position. There was even a picture up Jesse's skirt that Mary had taken under a table without Jesse knowing about it. This woman is a shit slug. An absolute shit slug, and she is no different than Thomas. She is a predator just the same. So once the police officers got over the initial shock and disgust of Mary's little confession, they asked her to fill out a police report, including everything she had just told them. Then Mary informed the police that Thomas had just called her on the Friday night, and Mary believed it was right after he had killed Brian. Mary told the police that Thomas stated in the phone call that her boyfriend was very easy to take care of. Mary asked Thomas what he meant by that, and Thomas's response was, "No 18-year-old is going to best me." And with that, he ended the call. So Mary knew that Thomas had done something to Brian, and she did nothing. She didn't call anyone. She didn't alert the authorities. Nothing. And poor Brian sat inside his truck, shot in the neck, all weekend long. What a bitch. Police were finally able to track down Thomas, and he was arrested for the murder of Brian Barrett. But once arriving at the station, Thomas told the police that he had nothing to do with Brian's murder. While they were... This is one of the best parts. So while they had Thomas in the interrogation room, police officers showed him a picture of Mary and asked him if he knew who the woman was. Thomas answered no, and the police officer informed him that the woman in the picture was in fact a picture of Jesse. In an article that I read, the police officer who showed him the picture stated, quote, "The blood drained from his head and he turned the color of the walls, which was a pasty white," unquote. How much did that officer enjoy that? I would have paid to see the blood drain from his face. Thomas continued to tell the police that on Friday, September 15th, he was at home with his wife and 2 daughters all night, and he told the police that all of his family would corroborate his alibi. Police went by the Montgomery home to speak with Cindy and the girls to get confirmation of Thomas's alibi. Cindy informed the police that Thomas was not home the night of the 15th, and she had no idea where he was. Ooh, that's gotta sting, huh, Thomas? Cindy, I love you so much. You are a kick-ass woman. We would be best friends. After Cindy would not corroborate Thomas's alibi, while he was in prison, Thomas would call his daughters and tell them that unless they told the police that he was home with them that night, they were going to keep him in jail for a really long time. And this son of a bitch did this over and over and over again. And he would make his daughters cry and basically make them feel like it was their fault that he was in prison. And once Cindy caught wind of it, she stepped in and put a stop to it. She filed for divorce from Thomas and took her girls and started her life over. Before his trial began, Thomas tried to end his life while in prison by taking a number of sleeping pills that he had found in another prisoner's cell, but he was not successful. Finally, Thomas realized that he had been caught and there was nothing he could do except take the consequences for his actions. So he spoke with his lawyer and decided to enter a guilty plea against the charges in the hopes of lessening the sentence. But then, at the very last minute, before he was about to be sentenced, based on his guilty plea, he fired his lawyer, hired a new one, and had that new lawyer file a motion to revoke his guilty plea. And he did this based on the belief that since he had the right to enter a guilty plea, he should have the exact same right to withdraw a guilty plea just as easily. Except that's not really how the courts work. Needless to say, his motion was denied. The Thomas Montgomery guilty plea was accepted, and it wouldn't have mattered. He would have been found guilty even if his motion to revoke his guilty plea had been approved, because not only did the prosecutors have the thousands and thousands of chat logs and messages and letters where Thomas was threatening to hurt Brian, but remember the peach pit that was found at the crime scene? Well, Thomas's DNA was on that peach pit. Apparently, Thomas had a snack while he was waiting for Brian to leave work that night. See, you just shouldn't litter. Thomas Montgomery was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He filed several appeals, each stating that in some way he was pressured by his own counsel to plead guilty, but all of the appeals were denied. As far as I can find, Thomas Montgomery has now been released from prison. According to the New York State Inmate Search, Thomas Montgomery was released from prison on parole on January 11th, 2024. And from what I can figure out, his parole will end in 2027. He served less years in prison than Brian was alive, and that in itself is a true crime. As for Mary Sheeler, the prosecutors were unable to charge her with anything, mainly because Jessie, the real Jessie, her 18-year-old daughter, was technically an adult under the law, which is absolute bullshit. When Mary was interviewed by police, she at first stated that the reason she kept on chatting with Thomas and continuing the relationship was because she was trying to make sure that Thomas didn't prey on other underage girls. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you were the hero of this story, Mary. I don't think so, bitch. You were having fun with all this, and you were a piece of shit who exploited her own daughter to get your jollies online while you were pitting two men against each other. You, lady, are an absolute toe jam sandwich. You may not have been charged and convicted of a crime, but you are just as responsible for Brian's death as Thomas is, as far as I'm concerned. So after the trial was over and Thomas was found guilty, police found that picture of Jessie that Mary took under the table, well, Mary had sent that to numerous men on the internet, all asking them if they liked what they saw. So Thomas and Brian were not the only men she was messing with online. You know, a mother is supposed to protect her daughter from predators, not sneak pics of her private areas and then send them out on the internet looking to have some online sex. The real Jessie, Mary's daughter, had absolutely no idea that her mother was doing any of this. After all this came to light, Mary's husband filed for divorce, and the real Jessie left with him and cut off all ties with Mary. And according to an article from 2012, Mary never apologized for what she did to her daughter or her family. As for Brian's family, they were left picking up the pieces and asking themselves how this could have happened. At Thomas's sentencing hearing, Brian's father, Daniel Barrett, read a victim impact statement. In it, he stated, quote, "My wife and I don't understand how this could happen, how such evil could walk the earth. To gun down a boy over simple jealousy does not make sense to us," unquote. The truly poignant and brutal truth of this case is that in an online world choked by lies woven by two middle-aged, unhappy adults, Brian remained the lone beacon of integrity, the only one who spoke the truth. And that, my friends, is the case of the Pogo murder. My thoughts. The chilling reality was that Brian died for precisely nothing. His life extinguished over an abysmal nothingness conceived in the bitter hearts of two unhappily married adults. Everything Brian had ever believed about Jesse, every cornerstone of his reality, was meticulously fabricated. A cruel and elaborate charade orchestrated by individuals too consumed by their own marital discontent to care about the devastating consequences. They spun a web of deceit, a self-serving narrative designed to alleviate their personal misery. And Brian became an unwitting pawn in their destructive game. You can't even say that this was about jealousy because the characters that Thomas and Mary created were just that, characters. I've never understood why when someone is trying to find a friendship anywhere, they would base it off of lies. Why would you not want someone to love you for you and not some ridiculous facade that you create and have to maintain for the length of the relationship? And there will always come a time when the truth will be revealed. And when that happens and the facade falls, the only thing that is clear is the path of destruction that the lies have made. And when that path of destruction is laid out in front of you and the truth comes into focus, the only thing left standing will be heartbreak and sorrow. That was a horrible case, and it kind of pissed me off that they used one of my favorite sites in the world to concoct all this harm. Mary may not have been charged with anything legally, which I still think she should have been, but she did pay a price, that of her own daughter. The real Jessie has not had contact with her mom since all of this came to light. I hope the price you paid, Mary, was worth it. You horrible, horrible witch. As for Thomas, 2020 was able to obtain Thomas's military records, and he was never trained as a sniper, shocker, but he was also never shipped out anywhere. He never saw any action of any kind, except, well, when he had to clean the latrine with his toothbrush. Pathetic. And with that, I think we'll leave it there for this week. Stay safe, get your pap test done, and enjoy your day today. This has been a Bitter Witness production.